I can give you my story very briefly. I'll concentrate on the latter part of the story. In June of 1944, we were in the Radom concentration camp. The Radom concentration camp was a labor camp run fairly efficiently by the Germans, which was using the Jews of the camp to work in a Daimler weapons factory nearby. So the level of food supply and all of that was not was sufficient to keep the workforce alive, because this was a production factory, of weapons, and the Germans were smart enough, whether they bribed the SS, whatever it was, not to let the Jews, these workers, die. And my father worked in a factory, and my mother worked in a factory. And but I was in a camp. There were only a few children in the camp, and a little bit of that experience of what it felt to be a child in the camp is described in one of the stories in a book, Inmate 1818, which happened to be my number, not tattooed on my body, but in this particular camp, each Jew wore a tag, a brass tag, and the story, how I got that number and all of that, is alluded to in a story in a book of 1818. But to get to the end, so to speak, when the Russians started moving, westward, the Germans started liquidating the camps, and they wanted to move the Jews to deep Germany, but more than that, they really wanted to finish the job. So they they eventually loaded our camp onto trains, which went to Auschwitz. And it's a long story, I'm skipping a lot of details, but at one point the men and women were separated, a whole long story, and me and my mother, as we were marched from a jail where we had been housed for a few days to the train, my mother grabbed me by the hand, but once again, this required preparation. It isn't just as simple as it sounds. But she grabbed me by the hand, and we escaped from the line, and the Polish crowd, which was watching us, open up and close behind us. So we did not get on that train, and the rest of the mothers and women and children who did. And for the next 6 months, from June of 1944 till January of 1945, we spent among Polish farmers. In the Polish countryside, we wandered from farm to farm, from village to village. My mother asking for employment, just for telling a story that she's displaced Pole and all of that, and just say, can you give us shelter and employment for the night or for a day or two? My mother taught herself. She happened to be, she was very bright. She was very educated, but she also knew how to sew. So she would stay at a farm and help out, either in housekeeping or sewing. And we would stay as long as the farmer let us, and then we would move on to the next farm, and then eventually in January 1945, we were liberated by the Russians.